Set phasers to yum and prepare to accelerate your brewing to warp speed with Imperial Yeast's new spring seasonal strain, AO5 Voyager. With its high flocculation characteristics and wide temperature range, Voyager is an extremely flexible strain for fermenting styles ranging from old school ESBs to modern IPAs. At lower temperatures, Voyager produces nutty flavors in malt-forward beers, while warmer temps produce apricot and peach aromas, perfect for those hoppy IPAs. AO5 Voyager is available now through the end of May 2019, so get some while you can. The options are as expansive as the universe. Welcome, everyone, to the 90th episode of the Brülosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and it's absolutely crazy to me to think that we've done this so many times, just 10 away from the century mark. Over the last couple of months, we've received a bevy of great questions, many of which we're going to respond to in this Brü A episode. Joining me to do just that is my much smarter and better-looking co-host and fellow contributor Matt Del Fiacco.
I don't know about any of that. It's appreciated, but I can't believe it's 90 episodes, man. This is crazy. I remember when this was just an idea. Like, I remember when we were like, can we handle the additional workload? Can we keep up with the content? It blows me away that we hit 90, and I'm so excited for it. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's and it's weird that we attach such meaning to numbers, but yeah. I mean, 100. We're only 10 episodes away from 100. That's 2.5 months, man. That's gnarly to me.
It's crazy. Like, speaking of like when we first started like talking about this, like 90 episodes. I mean, I remember like we were just like the day, it was like right before New Year's. Yeah. That you were like, hey, we're going to do an episode a week, go. And it was just like not like, it was just at the time I was like, this isn't happening. I know. No way. But yeah, it's great.
And here we are. Yeah. And Matt, you've been a big part of that. Yeah. I know you've been on probably, I think you and Brian probably have more episodes under your belt as co-host than anyone else.
Jake's got quite a few under his belt as well.
Yeah.
But the whole team's been just so great. Like doing all this, it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love these episodes in particular. For one, they don't really require as much planning as our typical experiment focused shows, which is kind of nice. But I also like how our listeners don't just stick to the basic brewing questions. Those can kind of get a bit redundant and boring. We've all kind of gone over the responses to how long do you mash and whatnot a gazillion times. I do want to encourage anyone listening now to submit their questions for future Brü A episodes. You can email those to Matt directly at feedback@brülosophy.com. And I'm being, super serious when I say that you can ask us about whatever the hell you're curious about. We honestly don't care. Open book, all that stuff. Again, that's feedback@brülosophy.com. Matt will receive those emails. He's stockpiling them for future shows. And if you don't hear us respond to your question in a show that's coming up, don't think that we're ignoring it. We only get to about 8 to 10 questions per show. Trust that it's still on the list and will be answered in a future episode.
Yes. Also, just to chime really quick, if you have a question and you really need a response and it's like not necessarily for a Brü A, like you're just trying to get feedback from us, definitely if especially me, if I don't respond, just ping me again. I get swamped with emails between this and with work. So just, if you're looking for an answer like outside of the podcast, let me know. Don't feel bad about reaching out again. It's totally okay.
And you can, and for those of you out there, if there's a specific contributor you want to talk to, if you know their first name, all you have to do is type that into your address bar, put a little @brülosophy.com, and you will contact them directly. We all have @brülosophy.com email addresses. So we do have a few things coming up that I want to let you all know about, some cool events that we would love to see some people at. First off, something we will not be doing is the conference in Rhode Island. A bunch of people have been asking us about this, so I figured I'd get it out there publicly now. Brülosophy will not be in Rhode Island this June, so keep that in mind. Just too much other stuff going on. Folks have also started asking about hop harvest this year. For some reason, the month of April, I know we're in May now, but the month of April was a very popular one for people asking what we're doing up in Yakima for hop harvest. Here's the deal with that. We were initially planning on heading up there the first week of October, and that's the Yakima Valley Hops Fresh Hop Party, which I strongly encourage everyone to attend. It is so much fun. However, this year, we're going to be in Yakima a couple weeks early, so we're still trying to settle on the dates. I think we're going to go the second or third week of September, only because I'm going to be speaking at the 2019 BrewCon in Dublin, Ireland, happening on October 5th, same exact day as the Fresh Hop Party. I've never been to Ireland, and I could not be more excited to hang out with some of the homebrewers out there. If you are interested, you can learn more at nationalhomebrewclub.ie. Had to sacrifice a killer party, but I think it's going to be worth it. So. All right. If you'd like to do your part to help us keep producing this show, there are a few things you can easily do to support us, like becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/Brülosophy. Patreon's a neat platform that allows us to give you some cool stuff in return for making a small monthly pledge. Rewards include access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with someone in the brewing world. Past guests have included folks like Michael Tonsmeyer, Gordon Strong, Vinny Chilurzo, to name a few, and all past sessions are available on our private Facebook page, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. And another really easy way to throw us some support is just by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your shopping experience won't be impacted at all, and we get a little kickback for the referral. So thanks to everyone who's been doing that, and thanks to everyone who has left us a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you listen to podcasts. We appreciate anyone doing that. All right, feedback this week is brought to you by Brewers Hardware, who have everything you need to deck your brewery out, from super convenient products like the Quick Clean Take-Apart Ball Valve, which turns any standard NPT kettle port into an easy-to-clean tri-clamp valve, all the way to electric controllers like the BCS 482. If you need it, they have got it. Go check them out at brewershardware.com, and don't forget to mention Brülosophy at checkout to receive a free gift. That's brewershardware.com. All right, listeners, Craig Larson, Jay Moore, Kelly Dunbrook, and many others over the last couple of years have written to ask about the absence of the Brülosophy podcast on Spotify. As someone who uses Apple Podcasts and Amazon Prime Unlimited for music, I honestly had no clue just how popular Spotify was. My word, have I received a lot of feedback about this. Anyway, about a year ago, I applied to make this show available on Spotify. And back then, that was apparently the only way you could do it. They had to screen people who were applying and whatnot. Well, I never heard back from the folks at Spotify. So a couple of weeks ago, I Googled it again, and lo and behold, now it's incredibly easy. And within a matter of about 5 minutes, the show is available on Spotify. So for those of you who are listening to this now through a service that you're not as a huge fan of, you can now go listen to the Brülosophy podcast on Spotify. And please, if you're there, if it's possible at least, leave us a rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. If you have show feedback, you can send it to feedback@brülosophy.com. Leave us a voice message by calling 951-444-0320 or drop us a note on social media. So, Matt, I'm really curious what you think about this odd, I'm just going to call it alternative beverage. It must have been about 7 or 8 years ago. I was kind of toying around with the idea of just fermenting apple juice, and I hit the web like most of us normally do. And one of the things that I came across was this very odd looking beverage that is got a funny name. I think it's fermented lemonade.
You're talking about Skeeter Pea.
Old Skeeter Pea.
Old Skeeter Pea. That's perfect. It always makes me think of the cartoon Doug. Just me Skeeter. Anyways, but yeah, man, Skeeter Pea is fermented lemonade. And I've never done it. And I have a hard time passing judgment on fermented beverages just because I've made Graph. I've tried to ferment a couple different things, but I don't know, man. It seems really acidic. I'm not really sure how it would turn out, to be honest. I've never had an example either.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't either until homebrewer and listener Timmy Williams sent some in, and he wanted to see what some of my astute friends thought of his Skeeter Pea.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
Another night, another beer, and nice and clear one here. It actually looks like water.
It looks like sparkling water. It looks like Zima. Could it be Zima? Would he be so daring?
That's not clear enough.
He knows that we are learned men.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Timmy. You first.
All right, let's check it out.
Yeah.
Oh, it does not smell good.
Well, it doesn't have to.
True.
Oh my God, it smells like farts.
Yeah.
Dude, it smells like farts.
It's very sweet.
Sweet farts?
Yeah. Oh, ooh.
No, that's ignorant.
Nice sweet farts.
It's ignorant. it. Oh, dude, it smells like farts and gym socks. Like, it's really pungent. Stings the nostrils in a good way.
It tastes totally different than
I
it
can't stop
smells.
smelling it. It's that dude thing where you're like, this stinks, and then you smell it 10 more times.
Very sugary, sweet.
Oh, dude, it's like a...
It's like champagne.
this reminds me of Marshall's cider. A cider from the Champagne region of France.
Nailed it.
It tastes all right, but it stinks so bad.
It does stink.
It's like something else I know. Beer! I'm talking about beer!
I have no idea what
It's like when you put your hand on your armpit to see if it smells, and then it smells, and you can't stop smelling your hand because you're a dude and we came from apes, you know?
I think it's champagne, actually.
He groans up and you groans up and you groans up. I would never eat at this place. Dude, I don't know. It's some kind of a cider, right?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Stinky cider. I don't do cider, so 0 jerseys.
Now, we'll give him a 2.
Corporate shill.
Well, he put some hard work into this.
You don't know if it's a he, A. You don't know if he worked for it, B. And you don't know if this is Marshall feeding us Zima.
It's not Zima.
You want to go to war, Balake?
Okay, so I again, man, you know, there are times where I don't agree with the dudes, and there are times where I really do. The aroma of this Skeeter Pea was, I have to believe that there was something going on with the yeast. I
don't know, man. According to Jersey, it smelled like your cider, so I'm not really.
Well, I mean,
honestly though, like to me, it's kind of. I think you're right. Like it's a yeast thing, but it kind of just sounds like sulfur.
That's what I mean, though, right?
You know.
Because there are certain lager strains that are known for producing. I didn't have he didn't send me the full recipe or anything, but there are certain lager strains that are known for producing more sulfur than others, right?
Yeah, and it could. Yeah, I mean, especially in especially cider, and I would assume more fruit fermentations, but I'm not as familiar with like wine or perry or anything.
Yeah.
But like sulfur is a really common byproduct, especially like with ale yeasts in a cider. I always end up getting some sulfur, and I have to let it age out for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So it might just be an age thing. I don't know how old or young that Skeeter Pea is, but it might that sulfur character might go away.
It's just got such a stupid name, Skeeter Pea. But regardless, I got to be honest with you. I was expecting an abomination. This drink was absolutely not as bad as I think. At least it sounded to me. I mean, fermented lemonade just sounds terrible. Not bad at all, to be honest. And I'm not going to be making any. And if you can get past that smell, it's pretty crushable. Nice little summertime, refresher. So something to consider for those of you out there looking for something other than beer or cider to ferment.
Yeah.
If you'd like to have your beer or any other fermented beverage reviewed by Jersey and Tim, you can email me, Marshall, at brewlosophy.com, and we'll get you all set up. All right, when we come back, answers to your questions. So I've been hanging out with brewers and craft beer nerds for a long time now, and while we do occasionally have our differences, one thing it seems we all share is a love of learning and trying new things, as well as saving a couple of bucks. Well, right now, Craft Beer and Brewing is helping fans of Brülosophy learn more while saving some coin by offering 20% off the price of a subscription to their awesome magazine. Chock full of brewing insights, tips, and recipes from industry experts, Craft Beer and Brewing is seriously great. I read every issue page to page myself. To get 20% off your subscription, all you have to do is sign up at beerandbrewing.com/Brülosophy.
Just as the Grainfather all-in-one brewing system revolutionized all-grain brewing at home, the Grainfather conical fermenter and glycol chiller take this one step further by giving homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation, just like commercial breweries use. With a full array of features including insulated double-walled construction, an innovative dual-valve yeast dump and sampling tap, and an integrated heating element and temperature controller, the conical fermenter provides a professional quality fermenting environment for superior temperature control. With the ability to individually power and control the temperature of up to 4 Grainfather conical fermenters, each with their own fermenting schedule, the Grainfather Glycol Chiller is the perfect addition to ensure superior fermenting results. And for a limited time, you can save 10% on your order by going to grainfather.com and entering coupon code NZB during checkout. Once again, enter coupon code NZB when you order the Grainfather conical fermenter or Glycol Chiller at grainfather.com. Once again, that's grainfather.com.
Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the super fast counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you. When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, do you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. All right, Matt, let's jump right into this with the first question, which comes from Adam Edwards. He says, I've dumped my fair share of batches. I broke a hydrometer in a beer once. I got hundreds of fruit flies in another. I've let one sit till they got moldy. I got a nasty infection from untreated raspberries, and I even recently dumped a sour lager after letting it sit for over a year. So my question, how quickly should you give up and dump? I ask because I recently made a session saison that rather bored me. Enlightened to try and improve the beer, I opted to add pomegranate flavoring to it, but I didn't grab the pomegranate extract. I grabbed hazelnut. This was an accident. God, this is like Murphy's Law here.
I love it.
I added a full 4-ounce bottle of hazelnut extract to a keg of hoppy saison. It was disgusting, undrinkable, and strange, so I went to the forums looking for help. Many people told me I should just dump it. I get the logic, but as a father who works 6 days a week, I won't be able to brew for a bit. So I took it upon myself as a challenge. I made a small stout-like extract batch on the stove, fermented it out, then added it. Still gross, but better. So I added some coffee. Still weird, but I could drink it. Then I ended up throwing in some vanilla and leftover bourbon, and it's delicious now. I didn't set out to make a hazelnut coffee bourbon vanilla amber saison, but does that really matter? So what's your take on dumping batches in today's times with all the extracts, adjuncts, and whatnot? Should you give up or take the opportunity to try something new? What's the worst that can happen?
I guess the worst that could happen is it makes you sick.
I don't know if
but
that's, I mean,
I guess that's the worst. I guess that's the worst. I mean, yeah, I'm a little conflicted on how to respond to this. Okay. So part of me really enjoys, the adapt and overcome mentality, that Adam has displayed here. And like, there's a resilience I really admire, like he's just like, no, I'm going to make this work. And I love that.
A tenacity, really.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But there's this, that said, like if a batch doesn't turn out, like if I'm like, I can't drink this, I typically dump, just because I make beer a lot. Right. I'm not a father. I've got, not tons of free time, but like I'm dedicated a little bit more to this because of Brülosophy. And for most beers, like age isn't the answer. Like something like a mead, or some ciders, I'll wait it out. I'll just be like, okay, maybe this will improve with time. I'll bottle up and wait it out. But that said, like I would never advocate against experimenting. Just kind of take detailed notes if you want to, like, because if you want to, like, so now you love that saison, right? And it's delicious. Which I don't know if it's a saison anymore. You love this experimental beer, and it'd be pretty hard to replicate, or it'd be pretty hard to like pursue it in a new way without some of those notes. So I guess because like this is a Q&A episode though, and I feel kind of obligated to try to give some kind of advice, like I'd be an advocate for learning what's going to age out, what won't, what can be blended away at what ratios. Just take notes. Like consistency is really, I think, the key to brewing well. I'm a big advocate for consistency. So that's my takeaway is like take notes, take details. Feel free to experiment, but also don't feel obligated to like drink bad beer or try to wait it out. Like be like, oh no, I have to make this work. You really don't. If you want to dump it or you want to do something else, dump it. If you want to like, if you're feeling a little risky and you want to take some chances, go. I mean, try it. Try
it out. My take on this, it all goes back to what he said about being a father who works 6 days a week.
Right.
I feel like, I mean, honestly, to each their own. Really, people can do what they want. They're going to do whatever they want. But when it comes to my thinking about if I'm going to dump a batch or not, I just don't care about the beer that I make enough. I don't care about the fact that it's around. I try to make the best beer possible, of course. But if it's not what I want, if it doesn't please my palate, or if my friends don't like it, the first thing I'll do is ask my friends if they want to take the keg. If they're turning it down, and this is very rare, I have zero issues dumping it. But like you said, Matt, I make so much beer so often that for me, the only reason I'm dumping is to free up space in my keezer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I just want that keg back, and I want to be able to put something that I like more in its place. If I'm working 6 days a week and I can only brew once every 8 weeks or whatever, then I have zero issues messing around with a beer that maybe it's boring at first. If it's truly bad, I'm just gonna dump it regardless, because I probably wouldn't think to add hazelnut extract and vanilla and bourbon, whatever. But that's my take. So I
Adam,
do think,
send that beer to Jersey and Tim.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No joke, Adam. If you want to get a real good review on your beer, go ahead and send it in to us. One of the things I think. And I don't mean to sound like a jerk when I say this, but I think a lot of homebrewers, because of the investment in time and and money into making a batch, that there's a lot of brewers out there who are just terrified to dump a batch and to toss it. But sometimes that's the best thing you can do, at the very least, for the friends that you share your beer with. So. Yeah. All right, Matt, next question, man.
All right, dude. Well, this one comes to us from Chris Baker, and this is actually, Marshall, this is going to be a fun one for you, because this is actually after our Bias in Beer episode, where you talked a little bit about your background as a psychologist, and your PhD, you got all the qualifications, and Chris wants to know how your professional and academic background influenced the way you've conducted the experiments here at Brülosophy. You've probably had exhaustive experience conducting trials on experimental and control groups, looking through literature, and making conclusions based on populations of people and data. Is it possible you'd have landed on the same experimental assessment routine without your background? I guess the real content of this question is I think it would be great to hear more about you, your background, and other aspects of your life.
Well, I'm, a lot of people I think hear my voice and they think that I'm this like 6'2". No. So I get this question a lot. Just even from family members and whatnot. They're, what's your interest in the whole beer thing and how does it carry over because of the psychology thing? I do feel like just kind of inherently that in some way I was I guess born with this interest in the way we work, the human condition, if you will. And that really did drive. I mean, I was telling people I wanted to be a psychologist when I was in 5th grade, and back then, of course, I had this beautiful idea, Fritz Perls and Carl Rogers, these guys who I just thought had this neat knack for people. And, but that definitely drove my interest in my profession. Of course, I think this is the case with any profession. Once you get into it, you see the nitty gritty and realize that it's not the thing that you'd been dreaming of. But at the very least, I do get to work with people all day long. And I love that. As far as the whole experimental aspect of it, I've performed. I had to, as a part of my education, I had to perform myriad experiments and whatnot. But the neat thing about psychology is that it's social science. So all of them had to do with people. It wasn't necessarily, at least the ones that I chose to do. Probably, this is an aside, but probably one of the funnest experiments. And people are going to be like, duh, of course he would do this. I did an experiment when I was an undergrad where we served, I can't believe the IRB approved it, to be honest, but we served like 60 people. Well, I think we had 120 people altogether in our sample size. Half got just plain Tang. The other half got Tang that we dosed with caffeine. I literally crushed up Vibrant and sprinkled it in, not thinking that it was going to taste like shit, and it did. It was absolutely terrible. But everybody was told that they got caffeine. We made all these students at this college wake up at 5:00 in the morning so that they could be at our thing at 5:30. Told them all they were getting caffeine. Only half got 200 milligrams, which is a hefty dose of caffeine. Here's the interesting thing. the people who didn't get the caffeine actually performed better on concentration tasks when they were told that they thought, when they thought they had received caffeine. So interesting stuff. But all of that stuff absolutely played into my interest into like the stuff I'm doing with Brülosophy. I've just always wondered about stuff, and I like to test it out. People, I think, are. I don't think I'm alone in being curious about the way things work and how our perception impact, or and our expectations and whatnot impacts, the way we perceive beer and whatnot. But I've always been the guy who's like, well, I guess I'll just test it out then. And that really is, I guess, the driving force behind Brülosophy. The approach that I take to writing up the articles and the way that we discuss things, that was all influenced by what I had to do in the past. But I also just thought it would be, honestly, just kind of an easy way to keep things organized. And I don't know. I think it's worked out for us. So hopefully that answers your question. Matt, I know you've actually got some background in that might kind of relay over to what we're doing here at Brülosophy.
Yeah, kind of like I talked about in like a previous episode. I'm a qualitative researcher in my day-to-day work, and so I don't have a PhD. I've got a master's degree, but we do small sample size test design and qualitative testing. And then, that takes a lot of different forms. That can be field observations, that can be, time on task stuff that's really tactical, or really high strategy stuff. That is kind of similar to you, Marshall. Like I've been less so curious about like the human condition for a while, but more so curious and about how, what is reality, I guess. But more so like what does reality mean outside of just like the raw context of the fact that atoms exist in a specific structure. Yeah. So I'm really interested in the ways in which we as human beings influence the world around us, and how our culture, how our expectations, how our language, all these things influence the way that we react to the world, like the way we react to stimuli. So that definitely I think for sure is a driving factor in like why I've been so active in Brülosophy and why I was drawn to it in the first place, is just the opportunity. And that, I've always like been a fan, so that's good. But I know like the rest of us who are on the team who don't necessarily have a background in testing or a background in social science research, they are just as curious. So it's just one of those things I think you can find fascinating. It's really cool to hear how your background has like definitely influenced us and definitely influenced the structure. But I would argue like probably Ray and Jake are incredibly critical and do research regarding our testing structure as well, and like the way in which we do this research. And so it's just one of those things that I think we all have found passion in, and we've all been able to relay our interests into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely. And one of the things I think it's funny because occasionally I think I may have read some feedback a couple months ago. Somebody who left a comment, I think in Apple Podcasts, and they their review was like, I like listening to you guys, but where's the certainty? Where is the conclusion? And that's, one of the things Chris asks is, or says at least, is making conclusions based on populations. Truth is, if I've learned anything in my, experience as a social scientist and all that, it's that making conclusions often gets us into more trouble than just being more equivocal about stuff, and thinking about things in a more open way. And I feel like regardless of how we couch our results, which is usually, these results from 25 people seem to suggest this. People take it and they're like, you said that it doesn't matter. No, that's not true at all. And we get that it doesn't matter. We hear that all the time, to the point that I've honestly had to press the pause button and just not respond when people say that anymore, because that's a matter of them misinterpreting results. And it's not our job, in my opinion. Our job is to do the experiments and entertain people. That's how I look at it. Yeah. It's not our job to train people how to interpret, brewing results.
Yeah, we do our best, like in those comments, to be like, listen, these things are limited by like we go into like it's limited by these factors.
Right.
We don't advocate like we're not going to call Sierra Nevada and be like, hey, listen, why are you still doing a decoction mash? Haven't you heard? I don't think Sierra Nevada decocts. I was just like saying that off the top of my head, but there is There's an exceptional quote from Jeff Sorrow, who is a analytics guy in the user research world, and he I think you'll like it, but it's basically, he says, doing small sample size research is like doing astronomy with binoculars. Yeah. But he goes on to say, Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter with the telescope that had about the same power as a modern pair of binoculars.
There you go.
And what he's kind of implying there is like small sample size research is by no means perfect. And it's definitely like the smaller and smaller and smaller effect sizes are, or the impact of a variable, the harder it's going to be for you to detect with smaller and smaller sample sizes. But you can still like kind of suggest things with it, right? You can kind of be like, okay, maybe this is the case. And then large effect things, you can get a smaller sample size and be a little bit better. Like if you, for example, had water versus Tang, we don't need 500 people to tell us if that's the case.
Right.
So we don't get into effect sizes too much. We don't get into the interpretation of stats too much. But I do like, we keep in mind that it's a very difficult and nuanced subject. And we just hope that you guys walk away from the articles a little, not humble, but a little like, maybe, or
scratching
like,
your head. A
maybe
bit,
I'll try this a little bit, or maybe I'll try this out. And then if you try it out and you're like, no, I for sure think this. Cool, man.
Yeah,
that's totally fine. Do it.
Well, Chris, we sort of went off track a little bit on your question there, but we do appreciate you asking it. Hopefully we responded appropriately. The next question comes from another Chris. This one, Chris Campbell from Portland, Oregon. This is a fun one, Matt. Chris says, let's say you have a magical, infallible ability to brew the best beer the world has ever known. Would you would you rather A, the beer tastes perfect to you but horrible to everyone else, or B, the beer tastes horrible to you but perfect to everyone else? I'm just going to jump in here and say this is a personality test if ever I've seen one.
I love this question. I'm going to make this a little harder for myself by saying that I'm going to assume Chris means that all the beer I brew is not just a single style, like not just one beer, right?
Okay.
All the beer I brew is either going to be perfect for everyone and terrible for me, or terrible for everyone but perfect for me. And I don't know that my answer changes, but I think it might. I'm going to say, without a doubt, I would rather my beer taste perfect for everyone else and terrible for me.
Oh, man.
I don't even have to think about it. Here's the thing, and I love sharing my beer. I love sharing it with my friends. I love going to community events. I love, if there wasn't a community around homebrewing and I wasn't engaged with the community around me, I would not be brewing. Because there is a ton of fantastic commercial beer that I love. So if I make a beer that I hate, but everyone loves it, I'll make that beer and I'll bottle it up for everyone. I enjoy having brew days, and I'll just work into getting session meads for myself, or cracking other commercial beers. The community aspect of brewing is too important to me to go to every single thing and everyone says, hey, this beer is trash. Well, it would be too much. There's a little bit of pride aspect there too. So sure. I'm fully willing to admit that, but that's where I'm at.
So so I thought about this question a little bit differently. I did think about it as more of like a single beer, but from my kind of real life experience with this would be New England IPA. I have no issues with the fact that that's a popular beer. Couldn't care less that there's 14 of them on tap everywhere you go, but I'm not a fan. I've had some of the best examples. They all taste the same to me. But people are trying to convince me, daily, well, you got to try this one, man. You got to try that one. I just don't like it, but everyone else does seem to like it. And you don't see me making too much New England IPA. However, I still have plans to make New England IPA, not because I'm a masochist who just wants to, but because of the fact that I like the fact when people come over and drink it, and they enjoy it. They like the New England IPA that I do make. And so there is that piece of it. This is one of those like moral conundrums, like, how narcissistic am I? Here's what I came up with to answer this question. If I were a 1 gallon batch brewer, I would absolutely make the beer that tastes perfect to me but horrible to everyone else, because I wouldn't have a whole bunch of beer around. The problem is I make 5-gallon batches of beer typically, and usually 2 at a time. So that's 10 gallons in my keezer that if only I had to drink, I don't know if I'd be able to get through it, even as perfect as it might be. So I think, and this is weird because if you ask my wife, she'd never guess that I'd say this, but I think I would probably make the beer that tastes perfect to everyone else and horrible to me, given the way that I brew today. That was a tough thing for me to come to, Matt.
Yeah, I know I did. I thought about this quite a bit, but it's a really fun question. Like, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Chris, for that one. That was a ton of fun. Our next question comes to us from Tom Wilson, and he says that I like to make in split starters to save yeast. To make life easier, I am looking into ways to pre-make starter wort that's shelf-stable, safe, and have heard of pressure canning. I'm curious to know if we are using sanitized vessels, hoping the water and DME, and then using an Instapot to can it are okay. Seems to me all the ingredients are processed, so if we don't contaminate things ourselves, should this be safe? If stored in the fridge, would it be safe? And I've not been able to find much on this technique, but it's certainly a time saver. What are your thoughts, Marshall?
Yeah, so I'm one of the like one-off people who still doesn't have an Instapot or one of these, instant pots. But my understanding is they are pressure cookers, right? I mean, I believe they rely on pressure to hasten the cooking process. I've done a lot of wort canning, and if I was a typical, once a month home brewer, I'd probably still be doing it if I was making starters. It works incredibly well, and it's very safe. It's just like canning food if you do it the right way. I highly recommend you just Google pressure canning wort. You'll find an article written by our friend Drew Beecham on the Malthus Falcons website. It's exactly what I followed. Very, very easy to do. And yeah, you don't even need to store it in the fridge. You can store that wort. It's shelf stable, so you can throw it up on a shelf. That's what I did. Is I went out and I bought a whole thing of 1 quart ball jars, the mason jars. Yeah. Spent an afternoon just pressure canning a whole bunch of wort in those things, and then stored them on my shelf in the garage. And when I went to make a starter, I'd just go grab one of those. The only reason I don't do it these days is one, I'm not making very many starters with Imperial Yeast. They pack so many cells into each pouch. But then also when I was making starters, I was making a lot of lager back then, and so I'd end up making I'd have to use 4 of my 1 liter things for one starter, and it just felt like I was wasting all this time pressure canning for 2 starters ultimately. So that's not why I'm doing it. But Tom, this sounds exactly like what or close to what Drew is doing, and what I think a lot of homebrewers are doing. Maybe the Instapot is too small is the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Honestly, I think the as long as like you said, like everything fits and you're thinking about temperature and time, in regards to making it shelf stable, like pasteurizing the whole thing, I think you're good to go. Like, I don't see a reason this wouldn't work, but I would definitely recommend, like Drew Beecham has a great article on this. Do a little research in terms of like canning wort, but I honestly don't think this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, likewise. All right, final question for this segment. I have a question. It comes from Cody C. I don't know what his real last name is, but he put C. I have a question on how to control your brewing steps and processes. I work all day in front of a computer following a set number of steps every single day. So when I get home, I admit to being super lazy and not wanting a checklist to make things to eat and drink. The latest example of this being forgetting my wort chiller when I was at a friend's house making him a cream ale a few months back, then having no way to cool it and letting it just sit over 48 hours to get down to temp. Then pitching and coming back 3 weeks to find our cream ale also ended up a kettle sour. Being committed to the craft, I asked my buddy if he wanted to bottle it. He asked if it was safe. I didn't see why not, and now we wait. So strike one for consistency, but also yay for encountering change. I thought making sour beers was way harder than that. Oh God. So what do? Do I just buck up and accept if I don't have a checklist? I'm probably going to make a mistake. Do I hide Post-it notes all over his house so next time we have a bro brew session we don't mess up? Do I try to find some list program for my phone and struggle with trying to type on a tiny screen with huge fingers? Truth be told, I know what's best to do, but being an adult and not being super lazy can be very frustrating at times.
Yeah, man. Being an adult sucks. I have to mow my lawn after this. I've got
adulting. Okay, this is a total aside. I just saw this thing on Reddit. It was where somebody was like, all these people who say being an adult sucks. I completely disagree. I am totally in the I love being an adult camp.
Yeah. So I will say, like, being an adult's pretty awesome. I'm with you. Like, yeah, it's 100%. I just don't like the responsibility of it. But yeah, being an adult's great. The trade-off is totally worth it. But anyways, I love the conclusion. I get it. And I just want to sneak a quick part B answer in there, that I am going to say that yes, making a sour beer is that easy. But making a good sour beer can be more difficult and tends to be more intentional. You can make a good accidental sour beer. It can happen. Just like, you can win the lottery. That's a great thing. That can happen to you. Just don't rely on the let it wait period to do that. Now, that said, like some people do a lot of open fermentation, or not just open fermentation, but, open collecting of bugs, like typically in a cool ship. So it can be done. You're good. You can also do kettle sours pretty easy just by pitching lactic. So you can do some research on that. So yes, it's that easy, but don't gamble on it every single time. Like you got a little consistency in there. Anyways, but the main, sorry about that, Cody. The main part of your question, lists aren't a bad idea, but you can still be lazy and make good beer. I don't want to, you can definitely cut some corners. So for example, you had that kettle and you just let it sit at ambient for 48 hours, right? You could definitely have put that kettle in a water bath in the sink or in a bathtub, and put the lid back on, just as a way to try to chill it a bit faster than ambient, which it's not ideal. It's not quote unquote scientifically ideal, but it's definitely still faster than ambient temperatures and would reduce your risk of infection by just pitching a little bit quicker, and it's not sitting out as long at those warmer temperatures. So that'd be my answer. Do whatever you're gonna do to enjoy your brew day, enjoy your time off. This is a hobby. You are relaxing, like you said. You're at work doing a really structured process, and if that's not what you want to do in your free time, don't. But start kind of developing an awareness of what corners you can cut and how you can cut them effectively. See if mashing a little shorter works for you. See if pitching a little more yeast and not going through with sterile air, doing aeration works for you. Figure out what those corners are and just do it effectively. Take some more notes on that, but don't feel that you need to be super regimented in order to produce good beer. I think you can still make good beer and, be a little laissez-faire with the whole thing.
To me, what it boils down to is, do you care about the fruits of your labor and the quality of the beer that you end up making in the end? I do. If I'm going to invest, even if I'm doing a short and shoddy batch and I'm investing 2 hours in the brew day, I still have to wait, a week and a half for that beer to be fermented out and carbonate and all that stuff. I want to enjoy it. I mean, at the very least, I want to at least think it's okay. So, I get a little bit blinded by the fact that I've been doing this for so long, and I have zero lists of anything that I check off on brew day. But again, I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. I can see, when I think back to about 10 years ago, I definitely remember having just a little checklist, and it was broken up into, the 4 main parts of brewing, from, mashing, boiling, cooling, fermenting. And under each of those had 2 or 3 bullet points. And I'd kind of go through that on brew days and just make sure I didn't forget anything. A note on the kettle, this weird accidental sour beer thing. I've had quite a few. I've tasted quite a few homebrewers accidental quote unquote sours that just, they're not good. Intentional sours are almost always better. But I get now, again, we talked about that dumping question, not wanting to toss this beer that you spent time making. To me, again, you want, the more intentional your brew day, the more likely it is that the beer that you're going to end up with is what you were expecting, I guess. And so if that requires just making a 10-point checklist, I guess that's what I would recommend doing. So, all right, Cody, hopefully that helps you out. We've got to head to a very quick break. We'll be right back with more Brü A. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer, and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort, from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature, in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com. And be sure to let them know Brülosophy sent you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Leach, creator of Brau Supply Brewing Systems, here to tell you about our latest Unibrow brewing system. Modeled after the brew in a bag method, the Unibrow uses the same kettle for both mashing and boiling, replacing the fabric bag with a stainless basket that can hold up to 20 pounds of grain. A heating element is run by an electric controller that allows for the maintenance of specific mash temperatures and makes mashing easier than ever. Each Unibrow is shipped with a counterflow chiller and the parts required to brew a batch of beer. We're really proud of the Unibrow, and we know you'll love it as much as we do. Go check it out at browsupply.com and sign up for our email list to receive special deals in your inbox.
Family-owned Atlantic Brew Supply is the largest homebrew shop in the Southeast. No gimmicks, no multinational corporate overlords, and no BS. They offer exclusive malts, yeast, and more from local artisans, as well as award-winning recipe kits. They also sell professional brewing gear and cask equipment from sister companies ABS Commercial and Cask Supply. Most ingredients are available by the ounce, plus Atlantic Brew Supply has an on-site calculator to help you craft your best brew. Orders are processed same day, and 2-day shipping is guaranteed for East Coast customers. Get 15% off your first order using promo code BREWPOD, that's BRUPOD, at AtlanticBrewSupply.com.
All right, we got a couple more questions to answer in this segment. So, Marshall, I'm going to throw this one to you from Tom Ferrelli, who says he's from Loaded Dragon Brewing Co. And I'm not quite sure if that is a brewery somewhere or if that's his home brewery name. Yeah. I like it. So, either way, that's awesome. Marshall Tom asks, can homebrew be carbonated and aged in cans? With the introduction of October Designs SL1 Homebrewer Can Seamer, no plug intended, canning has
Tom
become
wrote no plug
he
intended
wrote that.
himself.
He wrote that. That wasn't me. I don't call out whether I plug something or not because I'm not asked to plug anything. And
Likewise.
if I just plug something, I just say it. So
right.
Canning has become more accessible than ever to homebrewers, which is, this is Matt now. I agree. And that's awesome. That's
it's
a really
badass,
cool thing that I think has been happening. So Tom says that I received my unit over the holidays and absolutely love it. My idea is to dose my house Imperial Breakfast Stout with the normal amount of priming sugar and can carbonate the beer in 16-ounce cans rather than bottling in glass bombers as I usually do. I could see this being a problem if too much priming sugar is added, so instead of bottle bombs, possible bulging or busted cans, but I have the carbonation pretty well dialed in by now, so I'm not worried about it. Do you guys think this would work out all right? I also aged some of my stout, more or less at room temperature, for up to a year or so. Would the cans hold up as well as bottles over time? Should I can the flat beer with no headspace or, similar to a bottle, leave a little headspace, fill all but what the bottling wand displaces? Oxidation over longer periods of time concerns me as well.
Okay, so first off, I have to 100% agree that I had the opportunity to check out one of the October SL1, all of their can seamers, homebrew-sized can seamers. Not a bad price, I think, if you're really into canning beer. But they are badass and a really neat way to travel with your beer. And in my opinion, and I think you'll hear this from a lot of people, perhaps the best way to avoid oxidation if you're canning properly and this whole can conditioning idea. Now, I'm no expert on this stuff, so I had to do quite a bit of research to try to find what I think to be are some decent answers to this question. What little research I did, I found that typical cans used for beer and soda, so our standard aluminum cans, maintain somewhere between about 35 and 55 psi during storage. So when you're walking down and you pick up a 6-pack of Pepsi or whatever, that can in it has between 35 and 55 psi because of how carbonated the soda is. For beer, I think it's on the lower end, so I think I read somewhere like 28 to 35 or so psi. Mm-hmm. That's quite a bit. So you got to keep that in mind. Those cans aren't bulging. Now, we've all heard about these breweries who are I think kegging up their hazy IPAs perhaps a bit too early, and the cans start to bulge or explode and whatnot. So there is an issue there. So my understanding is that about 12 to 20 psi is created during the bottle conditioning process. So using that logic, it does seem like it might be possible to naturally carbonate in cans, assuming that the seam is tight enough. But again, I've never tried it. Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
I've never tried it. So I don't can any of my homebrew, though. Like I said earlier, I'm super excited about that becoming more accessible to homebrewers. And definitely, if you're concerned about oxidation over time, Tom, like that, cans are definitely going to be the answer. Like Marshall said, as long as you're doing it properly. I'm going to be honest. The idea of, I think the math, like you said, probably checks out. I'm a little hesitant about it. Like I'm a little nervous about carbonating in a can. I don't know why. But I would honestly say, like, if you are going to be canning, if you want to do it in the cans in order to remove as much oxygen as possible, I get that entirely. I would say if you're going to try it, if the math checks out, if you're going to try it, Tom, put it in a bucket.
Yeah.
And put a lid on it. If one, and don't like be hanging over it all the time, because if it explodes, you don't want to be around that. Put it like a blanket over it and just let it carbonate. See if it works out. I think you have a potential to try it out here. Otherwise, I think your option would be it sounds like you're not kegging necessarily, or this one you don't keg at least because of your bottle conditioning. This usually, like in bombers, you can definitely just get a keg, bottle condition, quote unquote, in the keg, or carbonate with sugar in the keg, and then use a bottling wand to purge those cans with CO2, and then fill almost to the top. Like you're going to have a little bit of headspace from what the bottling wand displaces, like you said, but you want it to be pretty full. Like you want to be as full as you want now, especially now that it's carbonated. You want to be as full as it can be, and make sure like that foam like will displace any oxygen in the can as well. So I think you have potential to try it. I think you've got some alternatives if that doesn't work out that are also really sound.
Well, so and the final point, I mean, he said that his typical process is to condition in bombers. I mean, how many times have you heard people say bombers were not intended for for carbonating
every time.
beer?
Every time someone brings it up. Absolutely.
Yeah, every time it comes up. And so, that's a risky thing, and it's been successful. I can only imagine, doing it in cans. Try it out. I mean, you've got the seamer. Might as well at least, try one. I would try carbonating it in a can if I had the ability to do that. Yeah, I think it's cool. So, all right, next question comes from Rob Smith. He says, I got a question on gelatin. First time I used it for a blonde ale, heated it in water in waves, as you suggested. So in our gelatin effect article. After I cooled and dumped it into the fermenter, it sank straight to the bottom. My beer was no clearer than any previous beer. Considering it was a blonde, I expected brilliantly clear beer. Should I have shaken or stirred the beer after adding the gelatin? Seems like I wouldn't want to disturb the beer. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Many. My first thought is that you shouldn't have been able to see it sink to the bottom.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the gelatin may not have been dissolved in the water when you added it to the fermenter. Like gelatin, especially if you add it when it's the water's a little too cold, has a propensity to cluster together.
Yeah, clump up.
The same thing that helps it all drop out, right? It has a propensity to get really stick together, and then like it's not going to be as effective if you just have a clump of gelatin. So the fact that you saw it sink to the fermenter, that's my first thought, is it probably just wasn't dissolved in the solution of the water. So next time, that's your bad. You want to make sure that it's fully dissolved. That's likely the issue. That said, I've had a beer or two with gelatin that just didn't clear up.
Totally.
I don't think gelatin is a cure-all for haze. I think it's haze dependent. It depends on what's causing it. It's what's there. And, sometimes it happens. Sometimes it just doesn't clear up. And that's okay too. Obviously, we want to make clear beer, depending on the beer. And that's, I admire the goal, definitely. So I would vote. That's, I think, first step. Make sure that the gelatin's fully dissolved in the water before you're adding it. Second step, it just happens. Try it again.
Yeah, I'm wont to believe that Rob, if you saw the gelatin fall to the bottom of the I'm assuming he's using a glass carboy then or something clear. Right. I don't know how you'd see that, but when I'm adding gelatin, it is the color of water, and I'm adding it to a darker beer, and it doesn't. I get really good results 95% of the time. Again, like you said, Matt, there have been times where I've find with gelatin and it doesn't seem to have any impact. One of those times was an experiment that we did with Ed Coffee on a New England IPA. Didn't seem to have. I mean, the one find with gelatin definitely had a slight better, I guess, slightly more clarity than the one that wasn't, but it was still a hazy beer. So it could be some other factor. This was your first time using it. I've found that certain yeast strains seem to react better or worse with it. For example, one of my favorite strains is the pub yeast from Imperial Yeast. That's the fuller strain. Yeah. And that one, that's a high flock yeast anyways. You toss some gelatin at that thing and you'll get a bright beer in a matter of 2 or 3 days. Then again, you use something like I think it's L17 Harvest. That one, even with dosing with gelatin and 40-degree Keyser temperatures, can take a week or so to really drop clear. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. Little update on the way that I do my gelatin stuff. I heard from Nick Impellitteri. This is the guy who heads up the Yeast Bay. A while ago, he said this idea that gelatin denatures with heat is just bunk, doesn't make sense. And so he's like, you can boil gelatin when you're making Jell-O. You boil it, like it's not a big deal. So all I do now is I add gelatin to hot water. I'm not scared of the water in my tank. I know a lot of people are. So I add the gelatin, half a teaspoon or whatever to a quarter cup of hot water. Throw that in the microwave and bring it up to just under a boil, and then stir it all up. Make sure it's nice and homogenized with the water, and then pitch it there. So I don't do that whole in waves like Rob said. I don't step up the temperature or anything like that. I just get it all done in one shot. So. All right, next question.
Yeah, so this question comes to us from Cody Copen from Houston, Texas. And Cody says, is forced carbonating in a keg traditionally done through the beverage dip tube as opposed to the gas inside? I have been brewing beer for over 2 years and have only ever kegged my beers. I've struggled with getting my beer carbonated to desirable levels. I normally carb through the gas side, not the dip tube, set my Keyser to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and set my regulator to 12 to 15 psi for a week. I feel the beer is never fizzy enough. Would I get better results by force carbonating through the dip tube if I keep PSI and temp the same? Also, is it good practice to turn the PSI down to a lower PSI for dispensing beer, or should I leave the PSI at 12 to 15?
All right, good questions. And so first thing I'm going to say is that if you're doing the whole set and forget carbonating method, where you put 12 to 15 PSI on your freshly kegged beer and then walk away. I've done this, I think an entire 2 times in my kegging career here. And it has taken, I did it one time just to see how long it would take for me to get a good carbonation. And I keep my, I serve it around 14 PSI with 12 foot, 3/16 line. It took, I think, about 3 weeks for the beer to get up to the point where I thought it was nicely carbonated and stable. So that might be your issue, because most brewers are drinking their beer as quick as possible. And I keep my Keyser at 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So very similar to you, Cody. My suggestion in response to this question is whether, I don't think it matters whether you go through the gas or the liquid dip tube too much. Yes, contact time is going to be different if you're pumping through the liquid tube, but I would be afraid of the, maybe off chance that the beer gets shoved back up into your gas line and potentially ruins your regulator. I've never done it. I use pin lock kegs, so I sort of can't do it without rigging my system specifically for it. Rather, what I do is burst carbonate. And so I know some people are uncomfortable with this or just not interested in trying it. Burst carbonation is incredibly easy. All you do is you crank your regulator up to about 45 PSI, hit your keg with that, leave it alone for about 18 hours, come back, purge your keg of the gas that's in there, reduce the gas back down to your serving pressure, which I'm going to get to in a second. And usually after 18 hours, the beer is perfectly, fizzy. And sometimes, depending on what style you're making and how much carbonation you want, you just have to kind of mess around with how long you keep the gas attached. But to answer the other question, is it good practice to turn the PSI down for serving? In my opinion, and I say this with a strong opinion on this one, absolutely not. If what you are after is a consistent carbonation, don't disconnect your keg ever. Don't ever turn your gas off. Leave that gas at 12 to 15 PSI connected the entire time. That is how you maintain consistency with your pour. I literally just in the last week heard from somebody saying, or saw on Facebook a person recommending to another brewer who was just getting their Keyser set up. All you have to do is once it's carbonated, you can disconnect or turn off your gas so you don't waste gas. Bad idea. Bad idea.
No.
Yeah. So don't do that. Just leave it at your serving pressure. But yes, you want to reduce your PSI if you are going to burst carbonate. So that's my answer.
I think that's perfect. I like you. The only thing I would add to that is if you're going to leave it at 12 to 15 psi, whatever your fermentation or whatever your carbonation psi is, I agree with Marshall. I would just leave it at that psi. That said, you look into balancing your keg lines, and your pour and stuff. Like, you want to just make sure you have the appropriate length of beverage tubing, from the keg to the actual tap, because there's going to be like a degree of resistance that is introduced by the length of that line and just by the size of that line. So and that's also another reason to do that, is so you can leave it at 12 to 15 psi and get that consistency while also getting a good pour. You just want to be on top of that, balancing your line, and it's based on the height from the tap to the actual keg, the pressure and the length and size of the line. So take a look into that, but yeah, keep it at 12 to 15. Yeah.
Well, and just outside of just consistent carbonation, to me, pour quality is a huge deal. I remember when I made my first Keezer, and I followed all the online tutorials, but it just drove me nuts when I would get a half a glass of foam, and the beer was fine, nicely carbonated and whatnot. Little did I realize the fix was as simple as just 7 foot more of 3/16 inch line. You know what I mean?
Right.
And honestly, the stuff is cheap. And do your thing. Get yourself some line, have your nice pours. So that, again, I'm kind of a nut when it comes to the way I'm serving beer. It's weird because, you look inside my Keezer and there's just these, I've got 7 taps and they're all wound up with 12 to 14 foot of line. I swap them out once every 8 to 12 months. I just want to keep them clean. So yeah, that's the answer. Definitely do not reduce your PSI for serving unless you've overcarbonated your beer. And then what's neat about that, if you reduce your serving pressure, not only can you lose a little bit of that overcarbonation, but you'll be able to serve, a nice fizzy saison or a cider. I do my ciders really high. I've been known to serve my cider at 20 psi. It comes out strong, but keeps that carbonation in solution. So, all right, next question comes from Tucker Skelly from Greenville, South Carolina. He says, in regards to lower brew house efficiency in brew in a bag brewing, when converting a traditional all grain recipe to BIAB, do you scale the specialty grains as well as the base malt to compensate for your efficiency losses, or just the base malt? For example, let's say I find a recipe online for a pale ale and it suggests 7 pounds of 2-row and 10 ounces of crystal, but I know due to my lower efficiency that I need to increase this by 15%. Should I use 8 pounds of 2-row and 11.5 ounces of crystal, or 8 pounds of 2-row and 10 ounces of crystal? I guess my question boils down to this. When scaling recipes for efficiency loss, should I only scale base malt or everything? Do you have a rule about which type of grains shouldn't be scaled due to efficiency loss? For example, don't scale crystal malts or dark roasted malts, but scale base and Munich malts.
Man, that's an excellent question.
Little thing, I just want to get base malt. Munich malts are base malts. So
there you go. Yeah. Thanks for that, Marshall.
I just want to clarify that.
And this is a great question. It's kind of made more complicated by Tucker's initial qualification of saying brew house efficiency as opposed to mash efficiency, because that implies that we're getting some kind of volume loss at another point in the process, and that definitely makes this a more difficult question to answer. And because when you're mashing, you're not just getting sugar. You're not just getting sugar from your grain, because otherwise you just wouldn't taste anything. Yeah. Like, you're getting other compounds and you're getting other color compounds and stuff like that. So when we scale for efficiency, typically what we're talking about is scaling the sugar content that we are getting, right? Because we're just talking about gravity.
Right.
So if you get 70% efficiency and I get 50% efficiency and I use more Munich malt than you for that same sugar content contribution, I'm also going to pick up more of those other compounds that are contributed by the Munich malt. But what makes this tough is that because of those assumptions about brew house efficiency versus mash efficiency, it's because we're trying to account for those losses. And that may mean that if I have the same mash efficiency, but I'm also scaling the recipe to account for my losses, that I'm getting more sugar content, or I'm getting more of that content for my brew house, but losing that volume?
Yeah.
So that's a tough question too. So my basic answer is, if you're trying to scale a recipe and you are scaling, like let's say in your example, right, a recipe that is a 72% efficiency and you get 66 or 65% efficiency, just scale everything. Because you are making a 5-gallon batch and it is very negligible amount of grain difference. It might be different. Don't get me wrong. It may actually be a noticeable difference between those things because you're using more or less specialty malts. And it also depends on the volume of specialty malts. But what I mean, like I'm saying, like in a Helles, it may be less impactful than in an Imperial Stout, like that scale difference.
Yeah.
But, be prepared to tweak some stuff afterwards, because it is you do get different things. Like the scaling of efficiency doesn't necessarily account for that. If you're scaling for volume, then just adjust everything for sure. That's totally fine. But the efficiency one's good. Be prepared to take some losses. But honestly, at our scale, I can't see how much of a difference it's really going to make.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. First off, I've kind of like a Plinko thought process when it comes to this question. The first thing is, if you're brewing another recipe, so I mean, obviously this the way that Tucker kind of asked this question seems to suggest that he's taking other people's recipes, plugging them into his calculator, and then wanting to brew them on his system. I can almost guarantee that regardless of how closely anyone sticks to a recipe, that just because of nuanced differences in our brewing setups and whatnot, that beer is going to be unique. It's not going to taste exactly the same. We refer to this as the brewer's thumbprint. So there's that. So with that in mind, the difference between 10 ounces of crystal and 11.5 ounces of crystal malt in a 5-gallon batch, I honestly don't think anyone's going to taste that or I'd be able to identify that is whatever the difference might be. But so I guess the simplest answer is do whatever you want. If you like the beer, you like the beer. People hate that response. So I'm going to say this. If I'm taking somebody else's recipe and I'm plugging that into I use Beersmith. I think it's one of the best, recipe design calculators out there. Go tell Brad I said that. If I'm doing that, I'm going to plug in the recipe exactly as it's designed, or I'm going to load the XML exactly, wherever I downloaded it from. And then all I'm going to do is up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little button that says scale. And you can press that and you can pick your exact brewing setup and it will scale that recipe exactly to how you brew based on your brew house efficiency and mash efficiency and all of that stuff. Oh, and all of your equipment. So I'm going to do that. Then what I'm going to do is go and change all the silly, fractions of malts, and I'm going to round those up or down just to make the recipe simpler. It's so funny to me when I see online people are like, in a 5-gallon batch, you have to use 7.65 ounces of, this malt. Come on now, use 8. It's a lot easier. Those extra 6 grains aren't going to do anything to the beer, but it does make things easier. So that's what I would suggest. If you are taking somebody else's recipe, plug it into your favorite recipe design calculator and use their scale function to scale it to your equipment, and that will take care of all of that. And then just go round up the malts and the hops and brew the beer. See what you think of it after that.
So hopefully, Tucker, that one, hopefully that helped you out. Our last question comes from Chase Jolie. And Marshall, he says, hey, I notice in a lot of your guys' experiments, you're going from grain to glass in a little more than 2 weeks, sometimes less. Is this typical? Don't you condition your beers for any length of time? Just looking for some advice. Thanks.
So, yes. And in fact, I would say it's not only is it typical, I think we actually turn our beers around, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, in less than 2 weeks, like most of the time.
My beers usually are around, like, especially like the pretty like quick ales and stuff I've been doing, like the Scottish heavies, like the low gravity Scottish beers. Those are all like 8 to 10 days. Easy.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm drinking them in 2 weeks for sure. And that's part of the reason we're able to do that is because we keg. We don't have to bottle condition. I do think that we got, force fed in the last 2 decades, this idea that beers are better with age, especially homebrew. My hunch as to where that came from is that a lot of homebrew was shit. And so if you let it sit longer, then whatever made it taste like shit kind of would fall out of solution, or the oxidation would take over and at least make it palatable. I'm being a little extreme with that, but
yeah, that's pretty hyperbolic of you.
I'm being pedantic. Sometimes
I like your, no, it's a fair argument.
My thing is that I like fresh beer. And for the most part, if I'm making a hoppy beer, or even if I'm making a nice malty beer, I just prefer the way they taste when they're fresh. And by that, what I mean is, as soon as they are presentable, as soon as those beers are cold, carbonated, and mostly clear, I want to start drinking them, and I enjoy them that way. If you think that you get some benefit out of keeping your beer sitting in a fridge, or even in your closet for an amount of time, then by all means do that. I think most of us agree that fresh beer tastes better. So that's the thing. Another question that I get that kind of goes along with this often is, how do you do that? I pitch good yeast, pitch healthy, Imperial yeast is what I'm using. But if you don't have that, make a nice starter, pitch that, ferment at a proper fermentation temperature. Don't be afraid to ramp that temperature up after a couple of days to really encourage attenuation, and then take care of your beer on the cold side so that you can get it in the keg without oxygen and burst carbonate. These are all little tips and tricks that we do to turn our beers around quickly. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, in terms of turning it around quickly, I definitely agree. And I will say, like, if you go into the articles and you read kind of like I guess it's usually like right before the final beer, kind of picture, I guess, you'll typically see like, hey, and this was set for a week or two carbonating before we served it to participants. And that usually has to do with when we have samples available. Yeah. Marshall, I know people come to your house. I end up going to a lot of clubs. So that means I'm like kind of on a time limit when I do this. So, there is some time like wrapped into the conditioning process, at least for me, that is mostly just based around the fact of when I can serve it to people. I'm certainly pulling samples for myself prior to that,
of course,
and I'm having that. So I honestly think it's a quality of ingredients thing. I think it depends a little bit on the beer, and it depends a little bit on like just what style you're doing. I know like for sure Brian's sour beers are like a year or 2 years of just being sour beers, right? So it definitely depends on what you're doing, but I think grain to glass and the time that we've been doing it is just it's kind of standard, man. It's
totally typical at the very least. And to be honest,
exactly.
I hang out with a lot of homebrewers in town here, and we all keg. I actually don't know many people, at least locally, who don't have some sort of a kegging setup, even if they're not homebrewers. I mean, Jersey and Tim both have keezers in their house. So
yeah, right.
And so that really does make the turnaround time a lot quicker.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I think a lot of us burst carbonate.
I think we all do.
Yeah, that cuts down a lot of time. If you spun, that cuts down a lot of time on like the typical 2 to 3 week carbonation period of set it and forget it. I think there's a lot of things we do that contribute to shortening that timeline. Yeah. But
and I think to finish this answer to this question, again, just to reiterate, if you like aged beer, then just let it sit.
Old ale's delicious. Old.
Yeah. And I will say that if the higher the alcohol outside of big IPA, the higher the alcohol, typically I will do a longer durations of conditioning just to let those flavors meld or whatever magical thinking goes into that stuff. Well, man, that was another great Brü A episode. I appreciate everybody who submitted their questions. Again, if we didn't get to yours in this episode, expect to hear it on a future one. And remember, if you have a question for us about anything at all, you can email it to feedback@brülosophy.com, and we'll add it to our ever-growing list, which is getting pretty long. Any parting words of wisdom before we hit the road, Matt?
No, I love these episodes. They're always tons of fun. Send in your questions. Continue reaching out. The amount of support and just like love we get from you guys is the best. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Amen, man. And make sure to head over to brülosophy.com to read up on all the experimental stuff we're up to. The Brülosophy Podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy Podcast. Until then, think beer.
off the morning with some hot tea. Lemon and honey cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.